the third Sunday of Ordinary Time. There's a coincidence. If you listen to the first reading or read the first reading, the people stood from daybreak to noon listening to Ezra read the book of the law, what they should do to be the people of God. And that took them, let's just say, 6 hours. Men, women, and children who could understand. Then, in a humorous thing in the liturgy for today, in the second reading, there's a long form and a short form. So maybe the presider will choose the long form, and maybe the presider will have the woman or man who is reading the second reading have everybody stand. Maybe have everybody stand to the whole liturgy, but it'll only be 45, 50 minutes and not in the hot sun. Or maybe the presider has compassion on the community and reads the short form of the second reading. That's just an interesting sidelight to me. The gospel today, it's in the chapter 4. So we've skipped from chapter 2 and nothing in chapter 3, which is a very important chapter because it's a lot about the identity of Jesus. Was it John the Messiah? That's center in the 3rd chapter of Luke's Gospel. And then you have the baptism of Jesus, about which we have reflected, where he hears who he is. And then, very interesting, he is tempted about his identity. The subjunctive in English class, pardon, I was an English teacher, is contrary to fact. If I were a rich man, Trevia sings in the Russian play, forgot it right now, but Fiddler on the Roof. If you are the Son of God, Jesus has heard who he is, and so the evil spirit tempts him about his identity. If you are, I will do this, and you will do this, and everything. Jesus said, no, I don't. In his mind, he's saying, I don't live in the subjunctive, in the possible. I live in the is. I am, the indicative. It has been indicated to me who I am, and I have received it. So he gets tempted about that at the end, or at the beginning of chapter 4. But at the end of chapter 3 is the genealogy. And it starts with Jesus, son of Joseph, and it goes all the way to Jesus was the son of Adam, son of God. So it gets very clear to the reader who Jesus is. Then Jesus, in today's gospel, so we're finally getting to today's gospel, Jesus goes back to his hometown where everybody knew him according to family law that he was the son of Joseph, son of Mary, in this little forgotten town. And he goes in to the synagogue. And remember, in chapter 2, he was also in the synagogue in Jerusalem, speaking wisely to the doctors of the law, what we call the finding in the temple. Remember that. So now he's in the synagogue, and he's 30 years old. So, 18 years later. a little story. I had a Jesuit friend who is senior year in high school, right before entering the Jesuit, tried to steal a package of cigarettes at the drugstore. And the owner found him and said, "Out, never come back here." So he left. 12 years later, he's home for his first Mass, and his mother asks him to go to the drugstore to get something. So he walks into the drugstore, he opens the door, steps in, and the owner said, "I told you out, never again." 12 years later. So he left, went to another drugstore. Anyway, Jesus, son of Joseph, as we have heard, also Son of God, steps into the holy place and begins. Now, last Sunday, we saw Jesus begin in John's Gospel his public life, changing the water into wine, the wedding feast at Cana. He goes public there. And this is where Jesus goes public, at least in the religious community of the Jews, the doctors and scholars. So they're all there, and the holy people and the people are all gathered. And he has an inaugural address. Now, in our country, in the United States, we just had an inaugural address, lasted 30 minutes, and much was proposed, and much was denied, and much was accused. And what he was going to do, the new president was going to do. It'd be very interesting to listen to that inaugural address and then listen to Jesus, who comes and says, "Could I have a scripture?" And they give him the scripture Isaiah. And he reads where it says, "The Spirit of the Lord has been upon me," referring to his baptism, his identification. "And so I have come according to this, under the influence of the Spirit. And as the prophet says, I have come to bring glad tidings to the poor. I have come to set captives free. I have come to give sight to the blind. I've come to do physical curings. And I have proposed a year of acceptance from the Lord." And he rolls up his inaugural text, puts it down, and he says, "What I have just read, that's about me. That's who I am. And I am because of who I am. I have been heard who I am. I have been tempted who I am. And I want to be who I am. It's not I want to do these things. I do them. There's an interior me that must come out. And I have read the scriptures. And I have read one of them. And that's me. I have heard it in my prayer. I have heard it when I was baptized. Now, I can do nothing except who I am." And so it's the beginning of the Gospels that we will hear during the ordinary times of this year. Jesus being who he is, believing, receiving, and doing himself. It just comes from him. One of the ways he finds out is his prayer, and he gets tempted. And that's what I'd like to have just a word about identity and temptations for us. How do you know who you are? How do I know who I am? One of the ways is about me, what gets most tempted. What is my temptation about doubt, I can't possibly do that. Fears. What will people say? What do people think of me? Those are temptations. And the evil spirit loves us to not have confidence with faith in ourselves. Because if you have faith in yourselves, you will do the things of faith. Setting people free. Helping people see better who they are and who life is for them. But if I doubt, and the tempter loves to keep me to myself, fearful, confined, imprisoned, blind to who I really am. And Jesus says, I have come to free people from listening to the temptations not to be who they are, but listen to whom I say you are, and listen to the grace of being baptized and the grace of living the Eucharist. What are the sacraments telling you about who you are? It's not telling you, you have to do this, you have to do that. It's how you live who you are. And the evil spirit says, good, I will tempt you about who you are so you won't do the things of grace. You will not do the sacramental living. So how do you know who you are? Listen to your temptations. You say, no, I shouldn't be tempted. Yes, pardon the English, but the gooder you are, the more seductive and confining and imprisoning and blinding will the tempter ask you to be, not to see who you really are. So how do you know who you are? Look at your temptations. Then, how do you know who you are? What does life tell you? What are your attractions? When are you your best self? Listen to those experiences. When are you generous? When does it come from your heart? When do you live from your heart? Your heart will tell you who you are. The evil spirit doesn't work on your heart. He works on your head, your memory, your doubts. But if you want to know who you are, look at how you come from inside out. What do you do that is really you? It'll be tempted. Not good enough. Other people do it better. Who are you to do something like that? And there are many voices telling us, out, don't ever come back. Be confining, careful, safe. Now when do you see yourself courageous? That's who you are. When do you see yourself generous? When does your heart say, yes, you are being who you are? You see, actions flow from inside. If you want to know who you are, look at what you do. And if that is who you are, then keep doing it as Jesus did, and we'll see it the rest of the liturgical year. We will see Jesus being himself by doing himself. He will help people see, not just physical blindness, but blindness about who they really are. Freedom. Comfort. Jesus is saying, the prophet has told me who I am, my prayer has told me who I am, my actions have told me who I am, and the tempter has tried to tell me who I am and who I am not. I live in the indicative. I live inside out. You, readers of the gospel, you followers of me here from Nazareth all the way to Jerusalem, you will see me doing things that are a revelation of who I know I am. Scribes might say, no, no. Political leaders, no, no, you can't do that. Jesus kept saying, I have to be who I know and have received myself to be. So it's a great inaugural address introducing his campaign to attract. attract us to be who we are, and then do